All right, everybody. Good morning. This is John Spielkla for GAI Insights with the GenAI News Briefing, rating the top news, essential, important, or optional to save time in your busy day. We've got some fascinating new stuff today. We've got a couple of entries in financial services, Bloomberg and S&P with Accenture doing interesting stuff. We have a claim of the death of RAG versus long form input. Argon's doing amazing stuff using LLMs for nuclear power plants. Oh my goodness, I hope they get that right. And new stuff out of Apple and also OpenAI. So busy news day. Ankash, please start us with the first one.
Sure, John. Just waiting for the article to come up.
Oh, sorry, that's my fault. Here we go.
Yeah.
All right, Luda.
Uh,
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Ankash, please.
so the first one that we have for today comes from Figure, which is backed by OpenAI, and it is showcasing its next-gen self-correcting humanoid robot. And this robot is already working in BMW factories.
All right, so we have the robot Germans here. What do you think, Luda? It's actually in South Carolina, but whatever.
Yeah, it's called Figure 2, Figure 02. And remember, there was a very cool introduction where the Figure 1 or 01 was flipping, cooking an egg and putting dishes in the rack. So this one is more looks more completed. It has a lot of dexterity in its hands. It seems like in the AI side, or its understanding of the world, it is able to self-correct and self-improve. So this is not quite clear what capabilities are there yet, but look at its hand. So dexterity. It's still kind of slow, as you will see in a couple of seconds. So there's a lot of improvement to be had, obviously, but it is a great step forward. Optional for our readers, I think, but tremendous opportunity for robotics and to show what is happening, and that it will be a main force in this, in the next 10 years for sure.
All right, so we have an optional. I came down to a similar place, which was fascinating new announcement. We don't have a lot of data in terms of how it actually performs and so forth. And Paul gives us the big O. All right, we're landing on optional fun video to watch, recommended for entertainment. All right, next.
Okay, the next one that we have come from Bloomberg, and Bloomberg has released a GenAI enhanced solution.
All right, I don't know if anybody's ever been to the Bloomberg Tower in New York City, but 57th and Lex, his own palace to himself. It's a good day to meet Michael Bloomberg, multi-billion-dollar company. I think it kicks out something like 4 or 5 billion in cash a year to Mike. So, in the words of my Polish grandmother, he's done okay in this country, growing up in Somerville, Mass, going to Harvard Business School. What do you think, Paul?
Well, in terms of his headquarters, I've been there a handful of times. I do like the notion he's got the internal spiral for employees to get more employees to bump and learn.
Yes. And then we have the company cafeteria, which is Le Cirque, one of the best restaurants in the world in the drive-in part. But anyway, okay.
Yeah, this article is optional. A company improving, adding GenAI to the roadmap is as expected now and not notable. So kudos for them, but they're like one of 10,000 other companies doing it optional.
Yeah, I also did it as optional, but I do think that we're returning to one of the critical ideas in marketing, which was taught to me by Ben Shapiro, someone that all you and I both know, which is that people don't buy drills, they buy holes. They want solutions. They don't want processes or products. And I think that is first cousin to the idea that we're going from the question economy, i.e. Google, where do I find stuff, information, to the answer economy. And so in that spirit, they're there, but definitely optional. Ankash, next.
Well, and one other quick thing there, John, before we go next one. I mean, this is another example of a company that's absolutely square in the crucible in our WINS framework and working hard to adjust their offerings.
Yes, and we'll see more of that with the S&P Accenture conversation coming up. All right. Ankash.
Okay. Yes. So the next one comes from U.S. Department of Energy's Argonne National Laboratory, they are using GenAI with nuclear systems.
All right. Yeah, with nuclear systems. Sounds like a bad combination. Anyway, uh, the Argonne National Labs out here, I think just outside here in Chicago, doing work in this area. I put this as important because if you dig into it, the large language model actually is effective in explaining what the physics-based models are doing. And I think that that combination of a rigorous physics-based model that does not hallucinate, that's a causal model, interacting with a translation model, and then to the LLMs to explain to the operators and to the diagnosticians exactly what's going on, I think is a fantastic combination, one we're going to see more and more. And for me, I rate it as important because these people are doing it. Obviously, it's still in the labs for sure, but they have a nice research paper, and they're doing it in the middle of arguably the highest, if among the highest, if not the highest risk situation. So talk about the ability to reason and depend and deal with it. So I highlight it as important because I think a lot of our AI leaders are in businesses. We're going to have this kind of multi-model combination for productivity.
I agree, John, very much. It's actually 3 units in what they're doing. They built what they call a Pro Aid, and that stands for parameter-free reasoning operator for automated identification and diagnosis. And then they have, so this is like a database of all the various things that can happen. And then there's symbolic engine that sits between this Pro Aid and LLM, ensuring the accurate and reliable diagnostic. It filters this through the validation set. And so it says 3 levels, and then LLM explains it. So that combination is actually a very powerful one. So yeah, and we saw it someplace. I think it was Siemens who was doing something like this, deterministic plus probabilistic, right? So that combination is very powerful. Agreed.
All right. So the 2 importance here, Paul, Adam, what do you think?
Go ahead, Adam.
Adam's
Yeah,
right.
so no, I agree. Yeah, that's it's an important consideration, and it really I think does a good job of highlighting strategies for mitigating the hallucinations and the things that actually LLMs are good at, right? Which is making inferences and making connections and maybe associating things that wouldn't otherwise be seen. That's what we need them for, and this is a perfect example of how you engineer that into a system while still relying on something that's deterministic where you really need it.
Awesome. All right, Paul, we're headed for important. Any objections?
No, I think just it's another piece of a lot of AI leaders we talk with are fighting a lot of resistance internally because of concerns about security. And this is a nice antidote. If they're finding ways on a nuclear plant use case, I bet we can figure out a way to do it in our manufacturing plant. So,
Yeah.
All right. No China syndrome here. All right. Next.
The next one comes from Substack and is written by Louis Francois Bouchard, and it talks about death of RAG. So it compares RAG versus long context LLMs.
Okay, a bit of a bait and switch on the title versus whatever, but what do you think, Lou?
Yeah, he says it's the death of RAG. When I saw the title, I said, no, that can't be. And yet the conclusion at the end is RAG is here to stay. So I rated this article as optional, but let's discuss it. We will also be talking about the Intel research or work in RAG Foundry, which I think in combination, these 2 might be actually important. But this particular one is optional. The reason is that if somebody is already using RAG and experimenting with a long window, they know all of this. This is like obvious. You can't, the long windows for certain things, you can feed a long document, a piece of code, and at one time and query the LLM on that document, versus RAG is more sustaining. It builds you a database of information in that particular space. You can use it. It's faster. So people know that. But this article points it out. But optional, I think.
All right. And do we want to, Ankash, do we hop down to the last one? I know, Ludi, you're covering that as well, the RAG Foundry.
Yeah.
Put two things together.
Okay, do that.
Ankash, could you? All right.
Sure, John.
Go ahead, Luda.
Ankash.
Sorry, my mistake. Go ahead, Ankash.
So this one is a research paper titled RAG Foundry. So they are providing a framework for enhancing large language models for RAG.
Yeah, okay. So it comes from Intel Labs. It is a well-researched piece of work that is open source. It is usable right now. And what it does, it actually creates a flow that gives you a way to experiment with different RAG methods and get the best one for your application. I think it's enormously powerful. There might be tools like that already out there. I haven't checked, but this is enormously powerful. You can switch the LLM underneath. They experimented with Llama 3, I believe, and another model, but Phi 3. So it's, but it has this augmentation. So how do you put the data together? This has training. This has the inference rules and the like, and then the evaluation function. So it's a really good flow that enables you to quickly put a RAG system together. So I rate it certainly as important as a piece of work that would be helpful to many companies.
Yeah, I would support important on this one as well. You can download the open source capability. There are a number of our clients who are, thinking through what kind of RAG architecture they want, what kind of RAG system they want. It's absolutely essential for certain kinds of tasks, as was pointed out in the Death of RAG article before. So it's important. So, Paul, we're leading toward optional on Death of RAG and important on RAG Foundry. You okay with that?
RAG Foundry, important, absolutely. I mean, RAG is the killer app. Everybody wants my data with the Chat GPT capabilities, and this is what it is. And we continue to find, I think, a lot of I can find executives who've got the wrong mental model. They've got Chat GPT as a business to consumer model, and the model that I want them to think about is their data in the middle with large language models around it, helping them extract and light up value for unstructured data. So important for this Foundry.
Okay, RAG Foundry makes that happen. Adam, I know you're driving and haven't had a chance to read these. What's your reflection on our?
That would be a drive-by rating.
Yeah, well, wisdom sits in funny places. What do you think?
I'm trying to understand. So do you, because I haven't had a look at it, do you upload your data to them and you test models with it then, or is it connected to something you run in-house on-prem? Is this going to enable more of owning your own identity, or are you giving it up to them versus someone else at this point?
I believe it is private on your own server. So it is just Adam, is a workflow. Really, it's piecing these components together and interfacing them together, so you could quickly evaluate. Okay, here's my data. Put it in, look at it, pre-train it, pre-process it, right? And then use maybe another way of training the model. So which is the best combination to get you the fastest result in cost and in performance?
Yeah, I think I could support important. I guess my argument towards optional would be, how many companies are really at the point where they're evaluating, Llama versus Phi for their RAG? Is it sort of just a little too far down the road in terms of maturity? It's good to know about, and that might be enough to say it's important. But I think most companies, at least the sense I get, aren't really at this point yet. And the technology is probably going to change by the time they're looking at what's available in the market to do this kind of thing.
I actually was thinking to put a case for essential, for the reason I talk to a lot of mid-sized companies. They really want fast ways. They know they wouldn't train LLMs and whatnot, and they want to do. Here's our very focused vertical data from our industry. How do we quickly put together something that will showcase to the employees and outside world that we are using Gen AI and create value for that? So
So
I
maybe
think
this
really,
is going to help address that exact thing that I'm talking about, which, yeah, I can understand why that would be much needed then.
yeah, I think it's much needed. And for us flagging it into important or maybe essential, I think that's important for the world.
All right, so let's land on optional for the death of RAG and important for RAG Foundry. All right, we are headed to the next one, Ankash, S&P and Accenture.
Done. So S&P has partnered with Accenture, and they are launching a massive AI training program for 35,000 employees of S&P.
All right, 35,000 employees of S&P. Paul, what do you think here?
You know, John, I know you have talked about a lot of companies are struggling with the ROI for employee training, despite the unbelievable task productivity improvement here. So I think this is a fantastic leadership aspect for a company that's in the crucible. I have it as important because I think it's a data point that the AI leader can use to help justify the expense. And we were talking to a CTO at a very large company, 40,000 employees. They have Copilot for 600. They're debating whether or not they can justify the ROI plus training for another 10,000 licenses. And I think this gives some evidence that other companies are finding ways or taking a leap on training and productivity enhancement at the employee level. So important in my mind.
Yeah, I was going to make the case for essential because I think we're seeing again and again, Paul, in our work that, it's if your employees aren't trained enough to actually see what's going on, this is an organizational capability. It is not a technology, and that's different from saying it's not just a technology. When someone says it's not just a technology, I want to bang my head on the table because of course it's not just a technology. That's like saying a novel is not just the words. I mean, come on, it's ridiculous. However, I do think it is different when you're talking about an organizational capability, which is a set of training, processes, management methods, and so forth, which is when you had something like cloud come into the enterprise. I think that the capability column was very narrow, right? It was a lot of things had to do with what was going on with IT and some process changes. This is much more open. It's much more like when spreadsheets came into the accounting profession. The whole way you did it was completely different. And so I would put this as essential. Here you've got a world leading company in S&P Global, Accenture, 35,000 people being trained. I think it's something that I actually sent it to a bunch of my friends in the consulting business to say, look, these folks, in my opinion, are doing it the right way. They're training deeply and broadly to create this capability for productivity.
And John, I think two data points on that just for our listeners. I mean, you and I had a call with a life sciences company with 30,000 employees, and they're seeing the same thing. We're seeing everything else. You can't just send an email to employees.
No.
You need to help them unlock. You need to take them for the first step, and that is instructor-led training somehow. And the other one is that we'll name the company, but that large services firm that has 100,000 plus employees, and they aren't doing any kind of internal training here, and they are absolutely in the crucible. So
yeah,
I can support exception.
Essential. All right.
Essential as well. But
I can support essential, John and Paul, but for slightly maybe different reason.
Oh.
One is to say, okay, let's train our employees, and I'm absolutely behind it, to really learn and internalize how you can apply this tool in your work, right? That's one thing. S&P is going a little further. They're saying, we're going to do this because it's a necessary step for us to lead the industry, differentiate that with that capability. They created AI benchmarks. They're going to, for the finance industry, they're going to really push the envelope in the finance industry using AI. So for them, that is not really, training the employees is not seen as an expense. It's really more like a differentiated capability that they can really lead, right? So that's a different perspective that in every industry, there will be a leader in that sense. So that's an opportunity. And that's what I would say on this article.
All right. Sprinting ahead at S&P, we're going to give it an essential. Thank you for that useful addition, Luda, in terms of why this is essential. Great. Akash, let's turn to the last article on You Are Helpful Mail Assistants.
Yes, John. So the next one comes from Apple Intelligence. So some users of Reddit, they have come up with the basic prompt that Apple has given, or the instructions that Apple Intelligence has, and they have made it public.
Yes, well, I looked at this and I thought this was optional. It's fun to see what kind of prompts the Apple folks are using that are going to be underneath the new releases of their upgraded Siri Assistant and the conversational interface that they're headed toward. Fun reading, interesting if you're kind of geeky, certainly optional for our AI leader. Any additions to that, folks?
No.
All right, we're headed for optional. All right, Akash, you can work on the tote. I just wanted to update folks on something I forgot to bring up yesterday, which is our Monday Learning Lab was fantastic. It was led by Rosemary Briscoe, which was around the issue of should you open up your site to the robots crawling you, and what are the relative benefits of going, what are going to be some of the relative benefits and challenges as we go from a search-dominated world to an answer-dominated world with LLMs. And that is available on our site, and really a worthwhile, 45 minutes to an hour. And I also did a brief 5-minute update on how to keep strategic control and competitive power as you deal with the large language models going vertically integrated. Okay, let's look at our code here. We have 1 essential, 2 importance, and 4 optionals for today. Essential being really unlocking capability to lead your industry, and a number of importance around the fact that you can actually use a combination of LLMs and physics-based models, deterministic probabilistic systems together. Very powerful. RAG Foundry, a great way to improve your productivity, and for the folks who are more sophisticated in choosing among models and approaches. Great. Anything else, Luda, Paul, Ankash, Adam?
I've got just a few quick announcements or updates. One is we continue to get fabulous feedback on people who are listening to this daily show that we had no idea. So I don't want to name the 2 companies, but John and I were on a call yesterday with a CTO of a major company. He listens to it. I had a call Friday for someone at a major CPG company. They listened to it. So we appreciate all the feedback. Second is we're also continuing to spend a lot of time on own your own intelligence concept, and there's an updated draft on our website on that. And we continue to explore and have debates about what is this category called. The Bear Group has been calling it compound AI systems. We've been exploring a concept called enterprise intelligence architecture. And if people are interested in exploring and have thoughts on that, please let us know, because we do need to name it. We've got CRMs and databases. What is this? And it feels very, very different than the last 40 years of databases and rule-based driven applications.
Yes, I think one simple way to think about it is you think about the data and transaction layer is kind of the old school one. That was the question economy and the access economy. The answer economy is really about the nature of intelligence. Where does it sit? Does it sit inside your organization, at the border, outside? What's the balance between humans and machines, groups of humans, groups of machines? Because that's where we're headed in terms of cognition and intelligence in the modern world.
If we could just cover on that, and I mean, Luda, one thing it becomes so clear. I mean, what's this going to look like 2 years from now, if our company's got 5,000 or 30,000 employees, if I have 30,000 employees, that's 30,000 humans. Each one of them have their own AI. So there's 30,000 digital twins. Then I've got 15 to 20 processes that have one or multiple agents in it. It's really getting dynamic. And I think how executives think about talent management being more than just people talent, but also digital intelligence is another brand new area that's going to be super important for the next 15 years.
Totally. I agree with you, Paul. And we used to really worry about significant knowledge folks walking out, right?
Yes.
With all the knowledge in their heads and in their pockets. It would be harder to control. So own your own intelligence is really key here, and how you put structures in place. Not banning, not like putting walls, but enticing folks to put it in the places where it will actually be useful to them, so that you can protect the knowledge. So I think it will see new structures.
Well, and I think just one other quick thing. So 10 years ago, I was at an HR vendor firm, and we sold a succession product. And one of the companies that used that was that they realized that a huge part of their knowledge thing were the buyers that bought the key thing. And there were like 50 of them, and it drove most of the profit. And they had detailed succession plans, career planning. It was reviewed once a year at the board level, quarterly at the executive level. And that was their talent management around that John, what we're calling that, the digital guild.
Yes.
Technology, my physical guy, and then what does that look like over in the digital world? How am I protecting it? I mean, it's really critical. You lose half these key people here, and you are materially impacting your business.
Well, that's what have to go.
Correct.
Yeah, I even think that how we conceive of work is going to change. Paul and I were in a conversation yesterday with 3 AI leaders, and they are thinking about their design around a persona. What persona do I need to get what job done? So it's not even a human and a job description. It's a persona in a process. And I think also this notion of human and machines, I think we're going to start thinking about, in the old days, back in the era of the guilds, master craftsperson wasn't just a master craftsperson. It was them plus their apprentices, plus their tools, right? A lot of times the tools were essential and they would go with the craftsperson, just like a chef today brings their tools with them. I wouldn't be surprised in the future if we see that kind of molecule of work where it's the apprentices, the masters, and then the tools that they use as we get, because we're going to see differential productivity that's going to be unbelievable. And so I think the succession planning is going to be a combo of not just the humans, but the humans in their environment.
Yeah. No, that's true.
And John, I know we're going over one example of that. I think is Air Force fighters in the military. I think in general, they're $2 to $4 million investment in each one of those humans. And now you start thinking forward here. It's a Air Force fighter and a digital twin.
Right.
And that's a very different way to think about that persona.
Right. Or if you think about, trading operations, there's the trader that I'm talking about financial services. There's the trader, there's the strat, and there's the quant. Right. So the quant's deep in the models and the methods. The trader has their intuitions and capabilities and relationships. And then the strat is sitting there, building some of the models and so forth, and, and putting the technology together. And that triad, is incredibly powerful. And anyway, I think we're going to see little teams like that and bigger teams. It's going to look less like regular army and more like special forces in terms of those individuals.
Yeah. I'll just remind you, the initial findings from the Microsoft Copilot studies was that the senior managers were actually more successful, and they expected them to be less successful because they wouldn't have the digital literacy, right? But it's actually that executive function. It's that senior management that you need to be able to conduct this orchestra of, machines and tools and agents, and understand what the outcomes are. Like, you have to operate at a whole different level when you have effectively like fleets of capability under your command.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think this whole thing of the agentic organization and what that looks like, and how it's in the productivity frontier of those organizations with capital and technology, it's going to be nutty. I mean, in terms
everyone will be a lieutenant, right? And they'll have their squad.
Yeah.
And the whole business as a result will be doing 100x the productivity.
Yeah, and that's gonna. I think it's gonna really reconfigure how we think about compensation, how we think about employment, how we think about training. Yeah, it's just fantastic. All right. On that note, we're on time at a half hour. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate the discussion today. Adam, thanks for hopping in from the road. Appreciate it. Luda, as always. Paul, Ankaj. See y'all tomorrow.